Jason Momoa arrived at the studio with his usual calm force wrapped in wild hair and tribal rings. His presence filled the hallway before he spoke, wearing boots that echoed against the floor and eyes that scanned every inch of unfamiliar energy. The crew admired him from a safe distance, not out of fear but he was set to appear on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, an appearance booked to promote a climate documentary, but everyone knew Momoa interviews never followed safe paths. Colbert was prepared with notes, jokes and his signature charm, unaware that his night would write itself beyond cue cards. Stephen Colbert was reviewing final notes with his writers in the corner office when they discussed the Momoa segment. They chuckled about the rugged charm and larger-than-life vibe. One writer suggested a joke about superhero stereotypes, another added a line referencing Momoa activism in a lightly sarcastic tone. Stephen nodded but suggested toning it back slightly. Still, he wanted to probe. He was fascinated by Jason, not only the actor but the person, a mix of surfer warrior and activist. He wanted to dig, but he had no idea how deep the fire went until it reached him directly. Jason stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. The crowd roared as he raised his tattooed arm. Smiling wide, he greeted Stephen with the bear hug, pulling him halfway out of his chair. The chemistry at first seemed playful. The banter began lightly with jokes about Aquaman and ocean conservation. Colbert quipped about the character riding fish, and Jason responded with a grin and a nod. Then Colbert leaned into his next card and the air shifted. His tone dropped slightly sarcastic as he asked Jason about performative activism versus real impact. It landed like a small stone breaking still water. Jason stared at Stephen, not with anger but with sharpened focus. His smile thinned as he replied, slowly choosing every word with care and weight. "I do not perform," he said softly, leaning forward. The silence after was heavy. The audience laughed nervously. Stephen tried to recover, saying he meant no offense but rather commentary on how celebrity activism gets perceived. Jason tilted his head. "And who built that perception?" he asked calmly, not blaming but clearly not playing. Stephen tried again, reframing the point, but Jason was already steering the conversation into real territory with deliberate steadiness. Jason spoke about indigenous communities, oceans on fire, politicians ignoring cries from the earth. His voice rose not with anger but passion. Each word peeled back layers of the persona. The crowd thought they knew he was not there to joke, he was there to awaken. The audience clapped, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Stephen interjected, trying to pivot back to a light-hearted tone, saying something about how even Aquaman gets dramatic sometimes. Jason looked at him for a long moment and said, "I am not Aquaman, I am a man with purpose, not a costume," with a catchphrase. The crew backstage looked at each other, uncertain. Stephen made one more attempt at comedy, suggesting Jason should consider running for office since he had the speech down. Jason responded flatly, "Maybe someone should who actually gives a damn." The crowd stirred, claps mixed with hush as Jason straightened in his chair and removed his mic, calmly placing it on the desk. Stephen watched, unsure of what was happening, until Jason stood up and said, "I thought this was a conversation, not a skit. I came to talk about the earth, not dodge plastic punchlines." Stephen blinked, trying to catch up. He smiled and said, "We can talk, but we also entertain. That is the show." Jason turned to the audience and said, "Entertainment without truth is distraction, and we have had enough of that lately." The audience clapped louder now, as if the confusion had turned into agreement. Jason stepped off stage, waving once to the crowd, who stood half stunned, half inspired. Stephen remained seated, watching him leave. The cameras still rolling. The moment, unscripted, raw and unforgettable, it would become one of the most talked about exits in late-night memory. After the break, Stephen addressed the moment without spin. He looked at the camera and said, "Sometimes guests come with their own mission, and that is okay. We invited Jason Momoa and he spoke his truth. That is the beauty and risk of this format." The audience applauded supportively, but the energy was clearly different. The clip hit social media within minutes. Fans reacted with admiration, some saying Jason had called out the system of artificiality that stifled real voices. Others defended Stephen, noting he had not mocked him but simply misread the energy Jason had brought to the room. Backstage, Jason was already in the car with his team when the clip began trending. He laughed quietly, watching it replay over and over with different headlines across every platform. He looked out the window and said softly, "That was never about me, it was about the silence I refused to keep." His team remained quiet, knowing his words would echo far louder than any prepared soundbite could. The silence in that studio would now speak in every repost, comment and quote shared across the world. Jason did not need to return to explain anything. The moment spoke enough for itself. Over the next few days, articles poured out dissecting the encounter. Some accused Jason of overreacting, others hailed him as a force of honesty in a world of carefully edited personas. Celebrities chimed in, some supportive, some cautious, but the public seemed more awake than divided. Young viewers called it inspiring, elders called it necessary. The phrase "not a costume" with a catchphrase started trending, printed on shirts and fan art and graffiti. Jason remained quiet, letting the echo spread naturally. No interviews, no clarifications, just presence and stillness in a media storm he had no desire to control. Stephen returned the next night with a monologue that lightly referenced the incident, saying, "Well, at least we know Aquaman can walk on land." An offset to it got laughs but lacked punch. There was a subtle shift in tone, a humbling perhaps, or a deeper awareness. He acknowledged Jason with grace, calling him passionate and brilliant. Even if the show moment had gone sideways, the audience applauded, but even they seemed more contemplative. Stephen knew the moment would follow him not as scandal but as a benchmark when entertainment met intensity and sparks flew without warning. Jason continued promoting his documentary, but now with even more attention, not just from fans but from those who rarely listened before. He appeared on podcasts, platforms that gave him space to speak in full, uninterrupted thoughts. He was eloquent, fiery, humorous and human. His words carried depth and conviction, unclouded by Hollywood filters. The documentary broke streaming records not because of studio money but because of word of mouth, a ripple from that night in the studio where truth interrupted television and transformed into something raw and needed. Students debated the interview in classrooms, media schools studied it as a case and live unpredictability. Activists replayed it as proof that sincerity could pierce the armor of entertainment. Producers across networks revised interview strategies, reminded of what happens when you invite the storm, and tried to laugh at lightning. Meanwhile, Jason stayed grounded, surfing forest hikes, filming storytelling not from press rooms but from the wild itself. His voice returned in speeches, projects and quiet deeds, but never again in late-night banter that reduced conviction to comedy. Stephen eventually extended another invitation, a symbolic olive branch, saying he respected Jason even if their exchange had not gone as planned. The invitation went unacknowledged publicly, but insiders said Jason appreciated it privately. He bore no grudge, only clarity. He once said in a quiet panel far from cameras, "Sometimes truth and television are not meant to share the same seat." That quote itself sparked conversations in journalism classes and production studios alike, a reminder that platform without purpose is just volume without meaning. Years later, people still remember the moment not as drama but as a point of friction that lit a fire. A man walked on stage not to perform but to speak, and when the stage did not hold him, he walked off without flinching. Jason Momoa left behind a viral clip, yes, but more than that, he left behind a statement about how authenticity once unleashed cannot be silenced, shaped or sold. The audience never forgot, and neither did the industry, and in that moment, without script or smile, the world was reminded that even giants carry messages, not just muscles.